This is using an extract from the absolutely brilliant novel The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This is a book by Stuart Turton, and if you're interested in narrative and how narrative kind of hangs together, then I well and truly recommend it. It's a brilliant murder mystery. But we're going to use it today to look at AQA Paper 1, Question 3, the structure question. So this question looks at how the writer structures the extract to interest you as a reader. And just in case you hadn't worked out that to interest you as a reader is a prompt in terms of discuss how structure is used in this extract, then that's basically what you're being asked to do. So first of all, when you come across an extract, you will normally have it contextualized in some way, whether or not it's the beginning of the extract, the end of an extract, etc. Now that's to allow you to appreciate what the writer is trying to do potentially with the structure. So you may have covered in class this idea of the narrative arc. I'm just drawing that there. The idea that you start with exposition, that idea of the hook, kind of giving the reader the ideas about the characterization, the setting, the main themes, raising questions. You get this rising action in terms of complication. There's some sort of problem. They lead to a climax or a crisis, and then you get a resolution. And actually, a kind of longer novel won't just do that once. It'll do it kind of like that each time, building. Think of things like the Harry Potter novels, the Hunger Games. There's kind of crisis after crisis building. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to give your examiner or your teacher the full explanation of how the narrative arc works, sometimes called Freytag's pyramid. You need to kind of blend this knowledge of what's going on into your appreciation of the text. So no definitions of exposition, no definitions of complication. We're looking at how the writer is doing it on that particular occasion. So your first thing is to just make sure that you've got the context. Here I've added in the box exactly what's going on, because otherwise in a confusing novel it's slightly more confusing. So we know that the narrator has woken up in the mysterious estate of Blackheath and that he's lost his memory and only knows what happened the night before when he witnessed the murder of a woman in the woods. Now, depending on how you prefer to read an extract, I would kind of give you one tip in terms of visualizing it. The first time you read it through, I would read it very, very carefully and try and imagine it as a film, or how you would dramatize it on camera. Because what you'll find is that the focus points for this question, looking at where the focus starts and why and how it changes and why, really come out if you think, okay, if I'm directing this, what do I want the camera to be picking out? What kind of shot do I want? Because what do I need to convey to my viewer? And all you're doing is you're doing this with the images in the text, with the narrative. So either you can read this on screen and fast forward me a little bit, or you can sit and listen to me reading it and try and visualise it as we go along. I collect my coat and umbrella from my bedroom and make my way outside, where rain is bouncing off the ground, the air smothered by the stink of rotten leaves. Uncertain of which window the bird crashed against, I follow the verge until I locate its body, and using the paper knife as a makeshift shovel, I bury it in a shallow grave, soaking my gloves in the process. Already shivering, I consider my route. The cobbled road to the stables skirts the bottom edge of the lawn. I could cut across the grass, but my shoes seem ill-suited to the venture. Instead, I take the safer option, following the gravel driveway until the road appears on my left. Unsurprisingly, it's in a terrible state of repair. Tree roots have overturned the stones. Untrimmed branches hang low like pilfering fingers. Still unsettled by my meeting with the strange man in the plague doctor costume, I clutch the paper knife and move slowly, wary of losing my footing, afraid of what might spring out at me from the woods if I do. I'm not sure what his game is dressing up like that, but I can't seem to shrug off his warnings. Somebody murdered Anna and gave me a compass. It's doubtful that the same person attacked me last night only to save me this morning, and now I must contend with this threatening footman. Who must I have been to have assembled so many enemies? At the end of the road is a tall red brick arch with a shattered glass clock at the centre, and beyond that a courtyard, stables and outbuildings arranged round its edge. Troughs overflow with oats, and carriages stand wheel to wheel, draped in green canvas covers to keep the weather off. The only things missing are the horses. Every stable is empty. "Hello," I call out tentatively, my voice echoing around the yard, but meeting no response. A plume of black smoke is escaping from the chimney of a little cottage, and finding the door unlocked, I chase my hollowed greetings inside. No one's home, which is curious as a fire's burning in the hearth, porridge and toast laid out on the table. Removing my soggy gloves, I hang them on the kettle pole above the fire, hoping to spare myself a little discomfort on the walk back. Touching the food with a fingertip, I discover it's lukewarm, so not long abandoned. A saddle lies discarded beside a leather patch, suggesting an interrupted repair. I can only assume whoever lives here has rushed out to deal with some emergency, and I consider waiting for them to return. It's not an unpleasant refuge, though the air's thick with burning coal and smells rather strongly of polish and horsehair. Of greater concern is the cottage's isolation. Until I know who attacked me last night, everybody in Blackheath must be treated with caution, including the stable master. I will not meet him alone if it can be helped. A work rota hangs on a nail by the door, a pencil dangling from a piece of string beside it. Taking it down, I turn the sheet over, intending to leave a message, but there's a note already written there. "Don't leave Blackheath. More lives than your own are depending on you. Meet me by the mausoleum in the family graveyard at 10:20 p.m. and I'll explain everything. Oh, and don't forget your gloves. They're burning. Love, Anna." Smoke fills my nostrils and I swing round to see my gloves smouldering above the fire. Snatching them down, I stamp the ashes out, eyes wide and heart pounding, as I search the cottage for some indication as to how the trick might have come to pass. "Why don't you ask Anna when you meet her tonight?" "Because I saw her die," I snarl at the empty room, embarrassing myself. Now remember, when you're going through this, question 3 will always have the same wording, with the exception of that wording being this bit, which changes depending on where the extract's taken from. So you'll always have to think about the whole of the source. You'll always have to read the whole extract again. It will let you know whether it's from the opening, whether it's from the middle, the ending, or whether it's a short story. So you'll be doing the whole arc in itself. This prompt will always remain the same. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? And it's a way in to writing about these things. And you will always have to think about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning and why this is. That why is critical. How and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops. And again, it's how and why that's really important. You know the focus is going to start somewhere. You know it's going to shift. Which bits are you going to pick up on? Why has the writer put them in? Then this third bullet point is the nice, useful, any other structural features that interest you. And preparing for this question, I would make a list of structural features. What is it that you can talk about in this question? And what can't you talk about in this question? Because you don't want to drift into language analysis. And language analysis, things like metaphors, simile, connotations, personification, alliteration, onomatopoeia. The structural features are the things that build the extract that actually the writer's using to either build it or stick it together. So it's things like flash back, flash forward. It's things like, is the extract chronological? Is it linear? Does it move in a line? Is it cyclical? Do we end up where we started, either in terms of images or emotions or so? Pathetic fallacy counts as a structural feature for this question, so have you got that? If there's dialogue in it, not just mentioning dialogue by itself, but what you get from that dialogue. Generally, the whole purpose of this question is, why am I being told this particular bit of information in this way at this time? So that's kind of what you are aiming to identify using your list of known structural features. And if you look at what you've actually got to do in terms of the mark scheme, you can look at clear and relevant is 5 to 6 out of 8 marks, and perceptive and detailed is 7 to 8. So for each one you get 3 bullet points, and those bullet points become kind of more detailed and perceptive, I guess, as it goes through. But in your answer, you need to show understanding of structural features, and you do that by recognising that the writer has chosen structural features. Remember your list, select the ones that are there, and you're basically going into the effect of them. Why are they there? What's the point? Why are you being told that particular bit of information in that way at that time? You need a range of examples, so for range you can't just do focus. I do initial focus and a couple of focus changes, and then look for the other things on your memorised list. And when you're using the terms on your memorised list, use them accurately to describe actually what's going on. So they are a handy shorthand, a useful way of referring to different effects to make sure that you know what you're talking about. To get perceptive and detailed, you need to kind of move it up a level, and you need to analyse exactly why the writer has chosen those structural features. You need to kind of go into the detail of why that is. A judicious range of examples means they are very well judged. You have chosen them, the best ones. You've chosen a good range, and you've chosen the really telling, important moments in that extract. And you are making sophisticated and accurate use of the subject terminology. So each one of those structural features you talk about, you've named, and you've really recognised exactly what's going on with that particular structural feature in this particular extract. So this is not a time for writing big long definitions of how something works. If I can cut and paste any part of your answer into another structure question answer, it's not specific enough. So don't explain to me what a flashback is. Explain how the use of flashback impacts upon this story at that moment that it occurs. Okay, and remember, when you're revisiting the text, you're visualising each part of the narrative. Ask yourself, if you were a director, what's on screen at that moment and why? Okay, so these are annotations that I've done earlier, and they're colour-coded in terms of the paper. The red is my initial thinking about the structure points, and we'll go through and see if I add anything to it. Now, when you do the structure question, it works really well if for 1 or 2 sentences at the start of your answer, you provide an overview of the extract structurally. That's different to telling the story. Okay, so you're not explaining what happens, you're explaining how, using your structural awareness, using those terms, how it works. So if you look at this particular extract, there is the material at the start up here that I've put in. You might want to give an overview of the structure that says, this extract written in the first person and present tense to create a sense of immediacy and intimacy moves from one domestic setting via the journey through an estate, but ends in another domestic setting. The writer includes his revelations, increasing the mystery and surrounding the character of Anna. And I've put they are cohesive devices because they are devices that are sticking your narrative together. So your initial focus, and look at what is in the first paragraph. You might want to kind of say that it seems opening ordinary and everyday. It's in the first person. These are intimate details. We are with the narrator as he collects his coat and umbrella from his bedroom. But the focus soon shifts here to the poor weather. So you've got that idea of pathetic fallacy. And what he's doing. Okay, so he's going in, it zooms in to him looking for and locating the body of a dead bird. And it seems to be nighttime. I mean, I can't actually find anything that says that. I've just always assumed that it is. But you move from that kind of secure, comfortable setting into that outside pathetic fallacy, rain, discomfort, unease. It zooms in on him finding the body of a bird and burying it with his penknife. So there is a sense of tension and mystery already in the extract. If you look at this section now, you can see that again you've got a kind of panning round on the setting, and his number one is the setting, and number two is his memory and thoughts. So those two things combine to create an effect. Setting, we've got the focus, the camera will be panning around looking at all of these awful trees and him clutching his knife. And we get this insight into his kind of internal monologue, what the voice in his head is saying. And again, that's increasing the tension because there's this sense that he's imminently going to be attacked. All of a sudden, on this line, as he's going through his physical journey round the estate, there is another focus shift to this revelation, this kind of moment. And you could argue it's a pivotal moment. You could argue that it's this moment where we understand something fundamental that changes our whole idea of the text. But there's this sentence in the centre of the extract really that says, somebody murdered Anna and gave me a compass. And the tension really increases at that point because there is this sense of violence. As we move through this kind of changed tone, the isolation which is being established by the focus on the empty, recently deserted buildings is being increased because the narrator is becoming increasingly isolated, increasingly vulnerable. So the focus is really shifting onto the fact that he's just too late, he's just missed everybody, raising the question. There's the use, you could comment on the use of dialogue here to emphasise his isolation as well. There's nobody responding to him. Then you get the narrative, the focus zooming in on the detail of abandoned items. They're constant reminders of the threat. There's been some sort of emergency. There's been something in this paragraph that has caused them to leave. And as he goes to get this message, structurally there's this different form of writing this message or the note in the middle of it. And that's important kind of for two ways, because structurally we get a different voice, we get a different form of storytelling. He's reading a different text. We get structurally this paradox. A paradox is something that's impossible. How can Anna know that his gloves are burning? Like if that note's, he's only just come in and hung his gloves up, how can she know that he's at the exact time he's reading that, his gloves are beginning to start to burn? And there's also the question raised by the fact that it's Anna, and we assume that Anna is dead because he saw her murdered the night before. The extract ends with that unsettling question in his internal monologue, and the fact that it ends by recalling the pivotal moment from the extract. He saw Anna die. So he ends up having to kind of relive that experience, trying to make sense of everything. So structurally, I would follow the focus through from the initial shift and pick, say, 3 focus changes and why there. And then in terms of the any other structural features, you've got dialogue, you've got pathetic fallacy, you've got internal monologue, you've got present tense and first person narrative, and you've got the kind of device of using the note, the different form of writing there. That would be more than enough for an 8-mark question, because obviously it's a one of the shorter opening questions, and you'd be looking at doing, say, 4 paragraphs. The key thing really is that each time you mention a focus shift or a structural feature, is you must put because if you carry on putting because, you are analysing why that structural feature's there. Good luck.